Supply chain. Supply chain is now being understood in various ways. People or manufacturing organizations or companies would like to get into a supply chain. It is often not thought through that what kind of a supply chain I'm getting into and what are the requirements of this supply chain. Hence, supply chain has become more of a concept of trying to do something in a collective manner. What does the supply chain do? In fact, supply chain is nothing but a link of procuring raw material, converting them into semi-finished, intermediary, and then the finished goods which is bought by a customer. So if you look at it from the raw material through the manufacturing process till the time a customer comes and buys the product. Now, various terms got evolved during the processes. Earlier we talked about vendor management. Suddenly, instead of vendor, it became a supplier management. What was the essential thing which caused this term change? When an individual company did most of the activities itself, bought out every raw material, made the components, made the finished goods and sold it, it was dealing with vendors. It negotiated hard. But as we understand that by negotiating it got the best prices. So if it was procuring at the least prices, then why suddenly it is not doing it? Sometimes the final product or the final cost impact on the product is achieved by doing so many activities within the system in a collaborative way which are going to reduce the cost of operation. So a supply chain is that link or that collection of linkages which convert a raw material into a finished good, and at various stages the best available resource or the least cost at which it can be achieved is selected. Sometimes the whole manufacturing process may not be under one roof. So what are the activities that a supply chain is doing? Let us say the raw material mining. Let's leave aside the mining part. The raw material starts. Somebody purifies the raw material. It is also a manufacturing activity. Maybe a different process. It may not be discrete, it might be process industry. Then that raw material could be used in multiple places. So this then gets distributed to other companies. Somebody might be making a bolt, somebody might be making a sheet, somebody might be making a plastic component, somebody might be making a wire. So raw material gets used in various industries. Now this raw material creates an intermediary, now which then gets further used to make sub-assemblies. Sub-assemblies may be common to two products, they may be common to two different companies. However, because of the technology developed by the final product developer, it tries to retain that competitive edge by aligning a set of suppliers in such a way that it is not very easy for the other manufacturer to replicate its product design. However, what we are saying is there are a set of activities which are done in a supply chain which actually produce or convert the raw material into a finished good. One way of looking at development of supply chain is to look at it in a very simplified way. When I say simplified way, That means we go about listing all the activities that are being done in a supply chain. And these activities can be done by one person independently, or one person might be doing 2 to 3 of these activities simultaneously. Let me list the activities that are generic to any supply chain. Number 1, production. Number 2, sorting. Number 3, packaging. Number 4, storing. Number 5, transportation. Number 6, financing. Number 7, retailing. Number 8, marketing and communication. Number 9, design. These are the set of generic activities that are common to any supply chain. It can happen that one link in the chain does more than one of these activities. However, the efficiency at which you do any one of these activities decides whether you can be part of a supply chain or not. So if we have to look at the competitiveness of a supply chain, you have to look at how that supply chain is handling the linkages between all these activities within itself. There can be numerous examples of development of supply chain. However, if we have understood the activities, then we can also then say that this is the way the future supply chains are going to go. The reason why I insist on taking this simplistic view is they not only tell you what tools to look for while being in a supply chain, it also tells you what more you need to do to bring out your effectiveness in the supply chain. The more activities you do in a supply chain, the better you are. If you do some activity better than others in the supply chain, improve the cohesiveness or the interconnectivity of a supply chain, the better you are. So if one needs to find its location or its seat or its position in a supply chain, you have to have a thorough understanding of how supply chains are linked and what functions they perform. It can be very nicely explained by an example which will follow. But right now, what I want to say is, when I say sorting, it does not mean that the item or the raw material or the product gets sorted only once at different stages of its manufacturing. It can happen that the sorting function is common to so many levels of manufacturing. These activities do not define the levels. By levels, I mean the raw material can get converted into intermediary, then the intermediary gets converted into a product, that product goes into a sub-assembly, that sub-assembly goes into assembly, and so on. These are the levels. What I mean by these activities is, everybody at whatever level he may be in the supply chain is doing one of these activities. And a supply chain collectively lands up doing all these activities. So for example, you have a electronics manufacturer and he retails a handset. So from the retailing point where the customer comes and pays money to the retailer, and hence the whole supply chain starts getting money, that is the customer end of the supply chain. If you look at it, right when the first raw material was mined, you can very clearly identify these set of activities. That means These set of activities in a combination and in a particular sequence convert raw material into finished goods. To do these activities, companies or technologies are developed. The reason why I am using this simplistic approach is you can look at it, what technology is being developed. So if you look at the internet technology, it is trying to do one set of activities, that is marketing and communication. You will see that the technologies try and focus on one of the 9 things that are listed. So internet technology can be used for communication and marketing by so many suppliers in the supply chain. It can be used by the final product manufacturer, and it can also be used by raw material manufacturer. The final product manufacturer may be reaching out to the customers, but the raw material manufacturer could be just reaching out to the final product manufacturer or to some of his other buyers. Similarly, you can talk about transportation. A constant increase in ability to transport can really increase the effectiveness of supply chain. Walmart worked very hard on the transportation part, and its model of business that time was constrained by transportation. They were able to find a cheap manufacturing source, or rather they found a very effective manufacturing source in China, but the goods needed to be transported across the Pacific to America. In trying to make its supply chain more effective, what it realized was the transportation activity within its supply chain was limiting it, or was the bottleneck. In other words, if the transportation activity could be improved, the overall effectiveness of Walmart's supply chain would be better. Moving thousands of containers across probably required hundreds of ships. This activity itself is very cumbersome, and the risk of missing out on transportation delivery date were higher. However, over a period of time and with constant effort, Walmart now transports thousands of containers across in just one ship. And naturally, this ship is designed to make sure that it is capable of doing it. Now, just by having this edge, Walmart's business was doing very well. What happened? The supply chain became more effective when we worked on improving transportation technology. So the technology works in one of these activities. Let's take the example of the internet. What did internet do? It just made sure that we were able to reach different customers in different parts where we had no access earlier. Or, in very simple words, it made us go to new areas of demand where it would have been very expensive for us to reach. It just communicated. It just coordinated. So something which was very expensive part or a cumbersome part, communication in a supply chain, was suddenly enhanced by availability of a technology called internet. But internet has its own assumptions that every rational person or a customer would have its ability to reach the internet. So The previous communication went to the doorstep or through TV reached the customer. Now here the assumption was that a customer looking for a product to satisfy his need would come onto the internet. However, it did make business easier for many small companies who had a right product but did not know where to sell it. And this marketing was an expensive part. So for customers who just had a product but didn't know where to sell it, and on the other end there was a customer who was looking for this product, this exchange was very easily done. Internet made many such businesses possible, but do not be carried away. There was a demand and then there was a supply. It was internet which connected both of them. By trying to just put yourself on the net, and if there is no particular demand for you, okay, it is not the correct way to use internet. So technology of communication came in. It made a big improvement in supply chain. For that matter, with this internet technology and communication connectivity, people are dumping production schedules on machines which are thousands and thousands of miles away from where they are sitting. So as this communication technology develops, supply chains become more effective. There's another example, transportation. Not only in the non-perishable, in the perishable parts. As we learn to freeze or make our cold chains better, we are transporting items being produced in Thailand to all over the world much more easily. All those supply chains, because there is less risk of the perishable going bad, the costs have also gone down. More so, there are no wastages. Let's take for example design part. As the designs improve, we develop technologies to do design better. The automobile supply chain has spent billions of dollars in using softwares that actually reduce the time to test a product, and hence they are able to improve on the failures, on the field failures of the components, and quickly reintroduce a better product. So the technology put behind improving the designs improve the effectiveness of the supply chain. Now this design could be done at the product level. The same design change could be done by a component manufacturer also. But finally, the designing and the testing part of the components is an activity done in a supply chain. Any supply chain which does it better than the other wins. So this is the list where the improvements are focused, and supply chain lands up doing all this set of activities. But if you look at the analysis, or if you're able to predict which way one of these activities will go, you can also land up predicting which way the supply chain will go.